This is the Spatial Media Expert Series presented by Skyrim.ai. In this episode, we look at the research of how fans create fans, using the 2026 World Cup as an example.
You know, usually when we talk about a traditional sports broadcast, there's this really ingrained expectation across the whole industry of just total unwavering literalism.
Right, yeah.
Like, the operational model for decades has been remarkably simple, really. You point a high-definition camera at a green rectangle, the referee blows a whistle, and the product you sell to the consumer is strictly whatever happens between those white lines.
Exactly. I mean, we've essentially treated the stadium simply as a container for the product.
Yeah.
It's a highly objective, almost binary way of viewing sports media. I mean, the lens is either focused on the ball or it's failing to capture the event.
Right, because if you're not showing the play, what are you even doing?
Exactly. We've built an entire global infrastructure around tracking the physical object of play, completely ignoring the massive ecosystem surrounding it.
And for a long time, that literalism has been, well, it's been comforting to the broadcast industry. You know, we like the product to be neatly contained.
Oh, absolutely. It's clean.
Right. It's easily packaged, easily analyzed, and easily sold as this standardized 90-minute block of television. But then you actually step inside a stadium. Or, better yet, you look at the raw, real-time data pouring out of the opening week of the 2026 FIFA World Cup right now.
Yeah, the data is just wild.
It really is. And suddenly, that neat rectangular broadcast lens feels incredibly narrow. We are looking at a landscape of value, of biological synchronization, and of immense cultural power that is entirely spilling out of the frame.
The event has fundamentally outgrown its original container.
Exactly.
And the shift in perspective here is monumental, especially for the architects of the next generation of sports platforms. Because, you know, sports organizations are fundamentally structured to produce competition.
Right.
They write the rules, they schedule the matches, they sell the media rights. But while the league produces the competition, it is the fans who actively co-create the actual sports experience.
Yeah, that's such an important distinction.
It really is. The moment we stop viewing the crowd as mere background noise and start viewing them as the primary cultural engine of the sport, well, the entire business model fractures and rebuilds itself.
Which is exactly why we are here today. Welcome to Episode 2 of the Skyrim.ai Second Annual Summer Expert Series 2026.
Got to be here.
Now, if you are a sports media professional, a sports business strategist, a technologist, or a volumetric video expert, you are exactly who this deep dive is engineered for.
Yeah, we're talking directly to you.
Our core mission today is analyzing how fans at the 2026 FIFA World Cup are actively creating new fans. And more importantly, especially for the spatial computing engineers tuning in, how we can systematically expand this phenomenon across all sports using spatial media and platforms like Stadium OS.
And we've got some incredible source material to back this up.
We really do. We are looking at a stack of incredibly fresh research today. It's anchored by the recent groundbreaking report titled Fans Create Fans. But we are pairing that with live 2026 World Cup data, deep psychological studies on group dynamics, neurological research into collective behavior, and advanced spatial media architecture.
Yeah, we're synthesizing all these distinct fields to understand a very specific sequence of events. Because, I mean, the traditional sports business model has always relied on a rather blunt equation.
Win games and you get fans.
Exactly. Win games, acquire fans. But the first week of this World Cup is demonstrating undeniably that the event is exponentially larger than the match itself. The drama might be unfolding on the pitch, but the culture is being manufactured in the stands.
And that culture is perhaps the ultimate customer acquisition tool we've ever seen in the industry. But before we get into the volumetric tech or the live case studies, we really have to establish the psychological foundation.
You're right, the groundwork.
Yeah. To really figure out how to capture and scale fan culture, we have to dismantle a massive misconception that plagues sports marketing departments. We have to kill the myth of the light switch fan.
Oh, the light switch myth is so pervasive.
It is, because nobody wakes up on a random Tuesday, watches 10 minutes of a broadcast, and instantly develops a lifelong undying allegiance to a franchise. It doesn't work that way neurologically or sociologically.
No, the brain simply does not adopt new core identities instantaneously. I mean, fandom is a heavily structured cognitive journey.
Right.
And the research points us directly to the psychological continuum model, or the PCM. This was developed by researchers Daniel Funk and Jeffrey James.
And what exactly does that model map out?
Well, they provided a rigorous, empirically tested framework for how a person's psychological relationship with a sport, a team, or an event actually constructs itself over time. It's a progression of cognitive load and emotional integration.
Okay, so the PCM breaks this journey down into 4 highly specific stages, right? Awareness, attraction, attachment, and allegiance. And the critical rule of this framework is that it is a strict sequence. You cannot bypass the early stages. You cannot just market your way straight to allegiance.
You absolutely cannot. Let's examine the mechanics of that first stage awareness. At this level, the cognitive relationship is entirely passive. You know a team or an event exists in the world.
But you don't care about their win-loss record.
Exactly. You simply recognize they're occupying space in the cultural zeitgeist. And the research indicates this initial spark rarely comes from the sport itself.
Really?
Yeah, it's usually triggered by peripheral media, by familial proximity, or by a highly visible viral moment generated by the fans. You know, a clip crosses your algorithmic feed, your brain registers the entity, and you cross the threshold of basic recognition.
Okay, so awareness is just getting your foot in the door.
Right.
But moving to stage 2, attraction, is where the dynamic fundamentally shifts. This is where awareness evolves into a positive, active preference. And the source material highlights a massive blind spot for the industry here, because this attraction frequently has absolutely nothing to do with the sport being played.
It's totally divorced from the on-field product.
Yeah, a person can develop a genuine attraction to a team because they resonate with the fans' music, their political values, their shared humor, or their aesthetic, all long before they understand a single rule of the game or can even name a player on the roster.
And that mechanism of attraction is precisely where traditional marketing fails. I mean, front offices operate under the assumption that attraction is generated exclusively through athletic excellence.
Like signing a generational talent or winning a championship.
Exactly. But Funk and James's model demonstrates that the supporter community itself is the primary autonomous magnet. You can admire a subculture completely independently of the associated team's competitive viability.
Which is fascinating.
It is, because the community lowers the barrier to entry. Shared human values are universally legible, whereas the nuance of, say, a defensive formation requires specialized knowledge.
You know, if I'm mapping this psychological progression to a real-world scenario, it perfectly mirrors the architecture of modern digital dating apps.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right. The mechanics are identical. Awareness is simply seeing an attractive profile populate on your screen. You acknowledge they exist, but there is zero emotional investment.
You're just swiping.
Exactly. Attraction is that great first date where you vibe with their personality, their humor, their energy. You are vibing with the fan base's culture before you ever look up their historical stats.
Yeah.
Then we move to stage 3, attachment, which is essentially deleting the dating apps and committing to a monogamous relationship.
Following that analogy, yes. Attachment is the phase where the entity stops being an external curiosity and begins integrating into your own personal identity matrix.
You're fully in.
Right. You're no longer passively appreciating the culture. You are investing resources into it. You're dedicating your weekend time to joining a watch party. You're spending capital on a team scarf.
Or expending cognitive effort to memorize the complex lyrics of a stadium chant.
Exactly. The relationship is now generating personal meaning and social capital through the friendships you're forming within that shared interest.
And if that attachment is nurtured consistently over a significant period, you finally arrive at stage 4, allegiance.
The absolute holy grail of sports business.
Right. Allegiance is the 10-year anniversary. It's staying with that partner even when they get a terrible haircut. Or, translated to sports terms, when your team suffers a devastating 5-season losing streak, fires their manager, and gets relegated to a lower division.
Allegiance is defined by its durability against negative external stimuli. The Allegiant fan is cognitively insulated against the team's failures. But the critical takeaway for the strategist listening is the structural dependency of these stages.
Because organizations obsess over extracting value from the allegiance stage.
They do. They try to manufacture it through loyalty programs or forced branding. But allegiance cannot be synthesized out of thin air. The pipeline requires a massive influx of people at the awareness and attraction stages.
And those are the exact 2 operational zones where organic fan culture drastically outperforms any corporate marketing campaign.
Without question.
Because you do not have to be a billionaire to get a first date, and a team doesn't have to win the World Cup to get someone's attention.
Yeah.
The vibe of the community is the hook.
Yeah.
But this raises a much deeper question. If we accept that fan culture is the magnet for attraction and attachment, we have to investigate the actual mechanism of that magnetism.
Why?
Exactly. Why is a crowd so incredibly powerful? Why does standing in a section of screening fans fundamentally alter a person's psychological state? To answer that, the research pulls us out of the realm of psychological theory and drops us straight into hard, measurable biology.
Yeah, we are moving into the physiological reality of what researchers term collective effervescence, collective joy, and physiological synchrony.
Collective effervescence. I love that term.
It's incredibly accurate. The sensation of magic or electricity that a person reports feeling in a massive stadium crowd is not just a poetic metaphor. It is a highly documented biochemical alteration of the human nervous system.
And the source material cites this phenomenal synthesis of research from the Associated Press. They analyzed the physical bodies of fans attending live sporting events.
And what they found is amazing.
It really is. They discovered that when a large group of people are focused on the exact same high-stakes event, their autonomic nervous systems begin to physically mirror one another. Their heart rates literally begin to synchronize. They are beating in time across the stadium.
The mechanism behind that synchronization is deeply tied to human evolutionary biology. But the AP research highlights a crucial distinction here, the difference between passive observation and active physical participation.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, when fans actively participate, when they engage in rhythmic chanting, synchronized clapping, moving their bodies in unison, or even performing a stadium wave, they trigger a massive spike in the brain's production of endorphins.
And not just any endorphins.
No, specifically the neurochemicals evolutionarily designed to facilitate deep social bonding and trust among strangers.
And this is the critical constraint for the volumetric video experts and broadcasters listening today. The research specifically notes that a remote viewer sitting passively on their couch watching a 2D feed does not experience this biochemical cascade.
They don't. The endorphin spike requires the physical active exertion of the collective. It's a biological closed-loop system.
To validate this, the source material cross-references multiple empirical studies. Like, there's an extensive observational study of a firewalking ritual.
Yes. They continuously monitored the heart rates of both the active participants and the socially connected spectators.
And what happened?
The data revealed synchronized arousal across both groups, proving that high-intensity shared rituals create a resonant biological field.
That is wild.
And there was another study involving nearly 300 participants that isolated the variable of physical movement. They found that while moving and exerting physical effort independently increased a person's baseline level of reported social bonding, the effect was exponentially magnified when that physical exertion was performed in perfect synchronization with the group.
So when I look at 80,000 people in a stadium executing a wave or jumping up and down shoulder to shoulder during a chant, I'm fundamentally misunderstanding the event if I just think they are, having a good time.
You're missing the core mechanic.
They're actively hacking their own biology, aren't they? They are essentially utilizing the stadium wave as a mass endorphin delivery system to force a tribal bond.
That is the exact neurological reality. I mean, a chant doesn't need to be lyrically complex. Clapping your hands over your head requires zero tactical understanding of the sport. It has absolutely zero impact on the physical trajectory of the ball on the pitch. But biologically, the act of performing that simple motion in unison with tens of thousands of other humans immediately upgrades your status from a passive observer to an active co-creator of the group's reality. Your brain interprets that synchronized movement as proof of tribal safety and cohesion, and it rewards you with a chemical cocktail that makes you feel intimately bonded to the stranger standing next to you.
That reframes the entire concept of a crowd. They aren't simply a loud demographic, they're a biologically synced network.
Yes.
And this shared biochemical identity actually overrides our default social programming.
Yeah.
The source material details this brilliant field experiment involving Manchester United supporters that perfectly illustrates how malleable these social boundaries become.
The methodology of that specific study is vital for understanding fan acquisition. Researchers engineered a controlled scenario where an actor, appearing to be a fellow pedestrian, tripped and visibly injured themselves, signaling a need for immediate assistance. The independent variable was the clothing the injured actor wore. The data showed that pedestrians who identified as Manchester United fans were significantly more likely to break their stride and offer physical assistance if the injured actor was wearing a Manchester United shirt.
Which is textbook in-group bias. Our evolutionary programming dictates that we expend resources to protect our recognized tribe.
Precisely the expected baseline. But the researchers then introduced a cognitive manipulation.
Oh, this is the twist.
Yeah. They ran the exact same experiment with a new set of participants, but prior to the exposure to the injured actor, they primed the participants with a different psychological framing. They didn't ask them questions about Manchester United. Instead, they asked them questions about their general love for the sport of football.
Oh, wow.
Right. They expanded the cognitive definition of the subject's identity from a Manchester United partisan to a global football supporter.
And simply by shifting that internal psychological narrative, the physical boundaries of their empathy completely rewired themselves. Suddenly, these primed fans were actively stopping to help an injured person who was wearing the shirt of a bitter rival team.
It's incredible.
The biological marker of the in-group had been temporarily overwritten just by changing the conceptual framing.
Taking that logic and applying it directly to the architecture of fan acquisition, the implications are massive. You don't have to demand that a newcomer instantly swears blood loyalty to your specific franchise crest. That creates way too much cognitive friction.
Right.
Instead, the boundaries of identity can be artificially expanded to be far more inclusive. A person can be invited into a broader, lower-stakes identity first. They can participate as a resident of a host city or as someone who simply enjoys the aesthetic of a shared celebration.
So the simple, low-barrier physical actions, the clapping, the synchronized singing, those serve as the biological gateway drugs that slowly narrow their identity down until they are fully integrated into the specific supporter culture. Yeah. Okay, so we have a highly robust theoretical framework now. We understand the step-by-step cognitive journey of the psychological continuum model, and we understand the biological hacking of the parasympathetic nervous system through synchronized movement.
Right.
So how does this translate from academic journals to the physical world? Let's analyze how this exact framework is executing itself right now in real time during the opening week of the 2026 World Cup.
It's the perfect live laboratory.
It really is. And the source material utilizes this tournament exactly that way. The 4 specific case studies provided are just masterclasses in cultural engineering. Let's begin with Japan, because they demonstrate how an abstract cultural value can be weaponized in a good way as fan culture.
Yeah, we are looking specifically at the events following the June 14th match in Dallas, where Japan played the Netherlands to a highly contested 2-2 draw.
A great match.
It was. Now, standard broadcast protocol dictates that once the final whistle blows, the cameras cut to the studio desk and the stadium empties. But the Japanese supporters remained in their sections. They produced large, universally identifiable blue bags that they had specifically brought with them, and they systematically began cleaning the refuse out of the stadium seating rows.
And as the Associated Press reporting emphasized, this is not some cynical PR stunt orchestrated by a marketing agency. It's an authentic generational tradition that first shattered the global media landscape during the 1998 World Cup.
Yeah, it's deep-rooted.
It's a direct translation of deeply rooted social and educational norms within Japanese society, where young students share the communal responsibility for cleaning their own classrooms. They are socially conditioned to eliminate friction for others.
The mechanism here is the visible manifestation of a core societal value in a foreign environment. But the virality of this moment in 2026 was catalyzed by a specific interaction.
Oh, this was amazing. Fox Sports was broadcasting from the stadium, and they had NFL quarterback Jameis Winston embedded as a field correspondent.
Right.
And Winston didn't just stand on the concourse, point a microphone at the Japanese fans, and narrate their actions like some zoologist observing a fascinating new species.
He got involved.
He actively crossed the boundary. He acquired a blue bag and physically joined the cleanup effort. He embedded himself in the ritual.
And that moment is the ultimate validation of the psychological and biological theories we just established.
It is the ultimate crossover episode. An American football player performing a Japanese civic ritual at a global soccer tournament. But it proves the absolute power of the low barrier to entry.
It really does.
Winston joining the cleanup effort proves that this specific cultural ritual was so visually intuitive, so stripped of specialized sports knowledge, that a total outsider from a completely different hemisphere could instantly mimic the behavior, participate, and feel a genuine sense of belonging to that group.
Winston didn't need to undergo a tutorial on Japan's midfield pressing triggers. He only needed to comprehend the universal human value of communal respect.
Exactly.
The fans themselves ceased to be spectators. They became the primary broadcast content. The media amplification of that single authentic act generated massive global awareness and attraction among demographics who will never watch a full 90-minute tactical soccer match.
Which fundamentally proves that highly effective fan culture doesn't have to be characterized by aggressive chanting or intimidating displays. It can be entirely driven by quiet, shared values.
Absolutely.
So Japan gives us the mechanism of values. Let's look at Scotland, because their operational model is wildly different. The source material analyzes how the Tartan Army is essentially transmuting emotional passion into hard, logistical infrastructure.
The context here is crucial. This is Scotland's first World Cup appearance since 1998. The pent-up generational energy resulted in tens of thousands of Scottish fans descending on the Boston and Providence regions.
And they didn't just show up. They actively altered the cultural geography of the city. They orchestrated a massive march through the streets of Boston, led by more than a dozen bagpipers.
Yeah, that was incredible footage.
And then they attended a local Boston Red Sox baseball game at Fenway Park and completely hijacked the auditory environment. Reuters published reports detailing how the Scottish singing became seamlessly integrated into the local baseball experience.
Even the mayor got involved.
Yes. Michelle Wu, the mayor of Boston, issued public statements praising the overwhelming warmth of the Scottish fans and their frictionless integration with the local residents.
But the truly revolutionary work, the structural engineering of fandom, was occurring slightly south, in Providence, Rhode Island. The fan-led organizing committees didn't simply arrive expecting to consume the city's resources. They built a fully functional, highly temporary pop-up city.
What does that mean, practically?
They executed complex logistical negotiations to secure hotel block discounts. They circumvented traditional transit bottlenecks by renting fleets of American school buses to transport their supporters.
Wait, they literally rented school buses?
They literally rent fleets of school buses. They integrated with local municipal agencies, and they leveraged their massive numbers to raise over $26,000 for local Providence charities.
So they function less like a fan club and more like an invading, highly benevolent municipal government.
Exactly. They constructed a localized support network that actively annihilated the friction of participation. And this is a foundational lesson for the sports strategists analyzing this data.
Right.
The Tartan Army certainly made it economically and logistically feasible for their own citizens to travel, but more importantly, they constructed a massive, highly permeable interface for the local American host community.
Because a resident of Providence didn't need to secure a $1,000 ticket to the actual World Cup match to physically experience Scottish football culture.
No, the fan-built infrastructure brought the culture directly to the local pubs, the streets, and the charity events. They built a massive, welcoming funnel that invited outsiders into the attraction phase of the psychological continuum.
Values for Japan, infrastructure for Scotland. Let's move to the third model, Norway. And for the spatial computing architects and volumetric engineers listening, this is the case study you need to dissect.
Definitely.
Because Norway is demonstrating how a physical, biological ritual can be perfectly optimized as a frictionless, shareable media asset.
The focal point here is the phenomenon known as the Viking row.
Right. Now, for those who have somehow missed this on their feeds, the Viking row is this intensely synchronized full-body movement. Thousands of fans in a stadium section will simultaneously sit or crouch down on the concrete.
And then, guided by a drum beat, they begin to rock their upper bodies backward and forward in perfect unison, mimicking the motion of a crew rowing a massive historical Viking longship.
It's so cinematic.
It is. They integrate rhythmic clapping, a deep guttural chant, and then they all rise to their feet at the exact same millisecond. And during this opening week, footage went completely viral of Norwegian fans executing this complex ritual, not just inside the stadium, but spontaneously on a moving escalator in a Boston transit hub.
On an escalator. The mechanism that makes the Viking row such a devastatingly effective media property is its visual density combined with its linguistic independence.
That's the key, linguistic independence.
Right, because it requires absolutely zero translation. You don't need to understand a single syllable of the Norwegian language to instantly comprehend the sheer physical power, the communal unity, and the subtle, self-aware humor of 200 adults pantomiming a Viking ship on an automated staircase.
It bypasses the language center of the brain entirely and communicates cultural identity purely through synchronized kinetics.
And the physical reality of that synchronization is just staggering. The source material highlights Norway's opening match against Iraq to prove the sheer scale of this energy. Erling Haaland scores twice. The localized fans in the stadium erupt.
But simultaneously, the massive crowds gathered at outdoor watch parties back home in Norway erupt.
Yes, and the synchronized physical movement of those remote crowds was so intense that the Norsar Seismology Institute in Bergen officially registered physical ground vibrations.
Unbelievable.
The collective cheering and jumping of the fans literally altered the geological noise floor of the city.
I mean, if we map that to a technological analogy, it is identical to a distributed denial of service, or DDoS, attack on a digital network.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right. Just as millions of simultaneous digital requests can overwhelm a server's bandwidth, tens of thousands of humans executing a synchronized biological action creates an aggregated physical wave that literally overwhelms the geological bandwidth of the local environment.
Wow.
Now, obviously, a seismic reading doesn't correlate directly to long-term fan allegiance, but it is the ultimate proof of the biological resonance we discussed in Section 2. The Viking Row takes that raw, chaotic seismic energy and packages it into a highly recognizable, easily reproducible kinetic ritual that a completely uninitiated newcomer can immediately mimic and join.
Which brings us perfectly to our fourth and final live case study, Qatar. If Norway is about organic media virality, Qatar is about deliberate, highly engineered community expansion. The organization is called Mudaraj Al-Anabi.
Mudaraj Al-Anabi is perhaps the most explicit example of a fan-originated culture deciding to aggressively scale itself. The genesis of the group is fascinating.
How did it start?
Young Qatari supporters analyzed their own presence at the 2022 World Cup and determined that their cultural footprint was too fragmented and scattered across the stadiums. They recognized a lack of collective effervescence, so they systematically organized a unified bloc.
And the data on their growth for this 2026 tournament is incredible. They began with a core contingent of roughly 1,000 highly dedicated supporters traveling from Qatar to the United States. But their designated section inside the stadiums rapidly expanded to hold over 4,000 active participants.
They quadrupled their footprint.
And they achieved that density by actively recruiting outside their demographic. They physically invited local expats, international tourists, university students, and members of various local Arab diaspora communities to step into their bloc.
They quite literally pulled outsiders into the physical space to stand with them, to learn the rhythms, and to immediately experience that biological belonging.
And that precise mechanism of growth transitions us into the architectural core of this deep dive. How does the industry actually scale these phenomena without destroying them?
Right, the scale formula.
Yeah. Mudaraj Al-Anabi demonstrates that active physical recruitment works. But they didn't achieve that 400% growth in a vacuum. They were backed by the logistical might of the Qatar Football Association, who provided the underlying infrastructure, the match tickets, the chartered flights, the transit support.
And that dynamic is the exact scale formula identified in the research. The winning trinity for permanently growing fan culture requires 3 pillars.
What are they?
It must be fan-originated, it must be institutionally facilitated, and it must be media amplified. Let us unpack that trinity, because this is the operational playbook for the sports executives listening. The first pillar is non-negotiable. The culture must originate from the grassroots level of the fans. It must possess genuine, localized authenticity. But an authentic grassroots movement will eventually hit a logistical ceiling. It rarely achieves global scale without the second pillar. An institution, whether that's a league front office, a team ownership group, or a national federation, stepping in to facilitate the infrastructure.
Right. And the brilliance of the Qatari model is that the FA provided the high-cost logistics, but they maintained a strict operational firewall. They allowed the fans to retain absolute, uncompromised control over the visual identity, the lyrical content of the chants, and the internal hierarchy of the supporter group.
The institution provided the blank canvas and the paint, but they allowed the fans to dictate the actual art.
I love that phrasing.
The underlying mechanism there is the removal of friction. And the broader sports industry desperately needs to internalize this distinction. Historically, highly paid marketing departments attempt to reverse engineer this process.
They do, constantly.
They attempt to script the culture top-down. They invent a sterile corporate hashtag. They project the lyrics of a sanitized chant onto the massive stadium jumbotron, and they explicitly instruct the fans to perform it on cue. And it almost universally ends in catastrophic failure.
Because the human brain instantly detects the artificiality of the interaction. It feels like a mandated corporate exercise rather than a biological bonding ritual.
Manufactured traditions carry zero social capital. The fundamental goal of a sports organization's marketing arm should never be to dictate human behavior. The goal is exclusively to eliminate the logistical barriers to entry.
Provide the massive fleets of buses, as we saw with the Scottish fans in Providence.
Exactly. Subsidize the warehouse spaces where fans paint their massive visual banners. Provide seamless, multilingual transit information. Grant the core organizers early access to the stadium architecture to set up their drumming platforms. The institutions build the physical and economic infrastructure. The fans provide the biological soul.
Okay, I have to step in and push back on this framework, because while it sounds elegantly balanced in a research paper, the physical reality is incredibly messy.
Oh, sure.
Doesn't institutional support inherently risk destroying the cool factor that makes these groups magnetic in the first place? The entire psychological appeal of a hardcore supporter group is that they are independent, autonomous, and frequently anti-establishment.
Right.
If the corporate front office starts paying for their transit and handing out subsidized tickets, doesn't it instantly feel like when your dad joins TikTok? How does a multi-billion-dollar franchise inject capital into these hyperlocal groups without the fans feeling like they have been compromised and turned into corporate mascots?
That is the precise, razor-thin tension that every modern sporting executive must navigate. And the solution relies entirely on the strict distinction between funding logistics and dictating expression. If a club executive signs a check to charter a bus, but attaches a contractual condition dictating which specific songs the fans are permitted to sing on that bus, the authenticity of the culture immediately dies. It ceases to be an organic supporter movement and devolves into a highly choreographed marketing activation.
Right, because it's conditional.
Exactly. But if the club approaches the group's leaders and simply says, "We recognize the immense value of your planned march to the away stadium. Here is a no-strings-attached municipal grant to cover the cost of the road closures and security permits," and then the club completely removes itself from the planning process, that empowers the group's scale without co-opting its identity.
I see.
The Scottish example in Boston is the perfect theoretical model. The Boston municipal government didn't attempt to instruct the Tartan Army on how to play the bagpipes or what routes to march. The city simply utilized its bureaucratic power to grant the permits that allowed the fans to execute their vision safely. Institutional facilitation is entirely about clearing the debris off the road, never about grabbing the steering wheel.
Clearing the road, not driving the car. I love the clarity of that operational mandate. So let's game out the next step in the sequence. The club successfully clears the road. The fans build an incredible, authentic match-day culture. The broadcast media amplifies it. A high-definition video of a localized chant hits the algorithms and goes insanely viral. It generates tens of millions of views. A massive influx of new people becomes aware of the team and floods into the digital and physical spaces. This system worked. You have won the acquisition game, right?
That is the assumption, but it is dangerously flawed. In fact, this transitions us into one of the most critical warnings contained within the research data. Virality is a highly volatile, double-edged sword. Getting 1 million people to walk through the front door is only half the architectural challenge. The existential question becomes, once those uninitiated outsiders arrive, what kind of structural environment are they walking into?
The virality trap. The source material is explicit on this distinction. Raw digital attention does not automatically convert into psychological allegiance.
No, it does not.
Just because 30 million people double-tapped a video of the Viking row on their phones doesn't mean the Norwegian national team just secured 30 million long-term consumers.
To map the mechanics of this trap, the report cites an incredibly detailed longitudinal study analyzing NBA online fan communities. This was conducted by researcher Yechun Wang and a team of data scientists.
Oh, I found this part fascinating.
It's crucial data. They specifically isolated and tracked the behavior of bandwagon fans, the massive sudden influx of new users who flood into a digital community when a team experiences a sudden spike in winning percentage or generates a massive viral media moment.
What did the data reveal about their actual progression through the fandom stages?
Well, the data scientists utilized advanced linguistic analysis to evaluate the user posts. They discovered that while these bandwagon fans participated at a highly aggressive volume, the actual structural language and vocabulary they deployed indicated a significantly lower level of deep psychological attachment to the core identity of the team, especially when compared to the linguistic markers of the established multi-year supporters.
Interesting. And crucially, the longitudinal tracking proved that this behavioral spike was entirely transient. Once the exceptional external stimulus faded meaning, the moment the team reverted to an average win-loss record, or the viral trend cycle moved on, the vast majority of those highly active bandwagon fans instantly abandoned the community.
If we revert to our earlier analogy, a massive viral moment is essentially just a highly optimized, flashy billboard for a new restaurant. It might successfully generate a line around the block on opening night.
Right.
But if a newcomer walks through the doors and the interior environment is hostile, or, more accurately for our specific discussion, if the established regular customers actively sneer at the newcomer for not knowing how to order off the secret unwritten menu, that newcomer is going to turn around and walk right back out.
Yeah, they're gone.
And the actual quality of the food or the quality of the sports team ceases to matter at that point because the social friction was too high. That analogy perfectly encapsulates the structural risk. If a supporter culture requires a newcomer to possess a PhD in the franchise's 70-year history before they are granted permission to participate in a chant, that culture will inevitably suffocate itself. It becomes a closed system.
And it gets worse than just exclusion, doesn't it?
It does. The research indicates the systemic rot can evolve beyond simple exclusion. Another highly detailed study of NBA digital forums, conducted by Jason Shuazang, mapped the specific vectors of toxicity within these ecosystems.
What do you find?
The data proved that users who engaged in heavy adversarial interactions with rival fan groups frequently imported that highly aggressive, abusive linguistic framing back into their own home communities. When raw, unfiltered passion is left structurally unmanaged, it rapidly curdles into deep hostility and gatekeeping.
So what is the architectural solution to the virality trap? How does an organization preserve the high-intensity biological passion of a supporter group while simultaneously ensuring the physical and digital infrastructure is actively welcoming to the influx of viral newcomers?
The research suggests a fundamental reimagining of the stadium. We must stop treating sports clubs purely as entertainment venues and start engineering them as vital social infrastructure. The British Future think tank conducted extensive research into this dynamic and concluded that clubs must take a highly proactive role in designing inclusive cultural identities.
How so?
Their actionable recommendations included embedding local community leaders into the stadium design process, intentionally architecting the physical plazas surrounding the stadium to encourage pre-match mingling, and, most effectively, implementing structured mentorship programs that pair deeply established veteran supporters with absolute newcomers on match days.
A literal buddy system for stadium onboarding.
Structurally, yes. It is the intentional transfer of social capital to reduce the friction of integration. And the source material provides a flawless, real-world execution of this exact philosophy. The Hammarby Women's Football Club, operating in Sweden.
The attendance data on this specific case study is absolutely staggering.
The metrics are unparalleled in their specific context. The structural foundation was a highly organized, supporter-led initiative that deliberately engineered a massive matchday culture specifically surrounding the women's domestic team. They deployed highly complex tifos, the massive, visually overwhelming choreographed displays that cover entire stadium sections.
Right.
They integrated synchronized drumming sections, orchestrated massive pre-match gathering marches through the city, and rigidly enforced a one-club cultural philosophy, ensuring the passion and songs utilized for the men's team were directly copy-pasted to the women's team.
And it paid off.
Because they intentionally engineered a culture that was highly participatory but structurally welcoming to new demographics, they successfully drew 17,623 spectators to a Swedish Cup final. And to prove the durability of that allegiance, they mobilized 7,000 traveling fans to cross the country to physically support the team as they won the league title on the road.
Mobilizing 7,000 people to physically travel for a women's domestic league match is an incredible logistical feat. And it perfectly validates the overarching thesis. A casual fan standing in your section asking a seemingly ignorant question about the rules of the game is not a threat to the purity of your culture.
Not at all.
They are the literal biological future of your franchise. The viral video clip on social media is merely the initial awareness invitation. The deeply welcoming, low-friction community architecture is the actual retention strategy.
Taking that logic back to our original four-stage psychological model, The traditional broadcast media constructs the base awareness. The viral fan-generated clip triggers the attraction. But only the active physical community architecture can foster the deep attachment that eventually hardens into permanent allegiance.
Okay, so we have exhaustively established the absolute necessity of the physical crowd. The psychological framing, the biological endorphin loops, the synchronized heart rates. Every single metric of success we have discussed relies entirely on the shared physical presence of human bodies in a defined geographic space. But, and this is a big but, this is the Skyrim.ai expert series. We have advanced technologists, spatial computing architects, and volumetric video engineers listening to this deep dive right now, and they are likely staring at their monitors screaming, how on earth do we translate a deeply physical, biologically dependent phenomenon to a massive, decentralized, remote global audience?
Which brings us directly to the bleeding edge of the industry. This is the transition point where we move beyond analyzing the physical stadium and begin architecting the future of broadcasting, spatial media, and highly advanced spatial computing platforms like Stadium OS.
Let us ruthlessly critique the traditional 2D broadcast model one final time to understand the problem we are solving. We established how narrow the camera lens is. Traditional television directors are fundamentally obsessed with tracking the ball.
Right.
They treat the fans, the exact biological engine creating the attraction and attachment stages, as entirely disposable B-roll footage. You get a 3-second cutaway of a cheering crowd after a goal is scored, or a panning shot of the stadium facade right before the broadcast cuts to a commercial break.
The traditional broadcast treats the cultural community as ambient background noise rather than acknowledging it as the core value proposition of the product. Spatial media, and specifically the utilization of volumetric video pipelines, represents a complete foundational paradigm shift in how an event is captured and distributed.
Explain that for us.
Well, instead of relying on a physical camera lens to capture a flat 2D rectangular image, advanced platforms like Stadium OS utilize massive sensor arrays to capture the entire live physical event. The players, the ball, the referee, and crucially, the entire crowd, as a dense, real-time 3D spatial data matrix.
For the business strategists who might not be deep in the engineering weeds, walk us through the actual mechanical difference. How does rendering a 3D data matrix alter the consumer's viewing experience compared to just switching between camera feeds?
The technological leap is profound. In a traditional broadcast, the viewer's perspective is entirely dictated by the director sitting in a production truck. You see exactly what they allow you to see. But in a volumetric spatial environment, the physical stadium is rendered as a highly accurate point cloud. This means the digital environment becomes infinitely explorable. There are no physical cameras. There are only virtual cameras that can be placed at any XYZ coordinate within the rendered volume.
So you have total freedom.
Total freedom. A remote fan logging into a spatial computing platform doesn't have to passively watch the tactical shape of the pitch from a fixed, high-angle broadcast gantry. They can use their interface to quite literally teleport their virtual perspective directly inside the Tartan Army supporter section.
Wow.
They can physically look around, experiencing the sheer vertical scale and the synchronized movement of the fans from the inside out, exactly as if they were standing on the concrete steps.
So if I am accurately mapping the underlying architecture of Stadium OS based on the source material provided, the fundamental innovation is the total untethering of the broadcast from the director's booth. You are theoretically allowing a remote fan sitting in a Tokyo apartment to teleport their digital avatar directly onto that escalator in Boston to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Viking Row.
Visually and geographically, yes, that is the exact capability of the rendering pipeline. But here is the massive existential constraint, and this speaks directly to the spatial computing engineers tuning in today. Remember the deep biological research we unpacked in Section 2.
The parasympathetic nervous system.
Yes, the endorphin spikes, the heart rates synchronizing.
Right. The Associated Press data was highly explicit. Passive remote viewing does not trigger the necessary biological response required for true social bonding.
Exactly the problem. Therefore, generating a mathematically perfect high-resolution 3D visual recording of a crowd is fundamentally insufficient. If the volumetric pipeline simply renders a perfect visual copy of the Tartan Army and allows a remote user to flow through it, you haven't recreated the cultural experience. You are simply allowing a remote viewer to passively watch an immersive 3D movie.
They're still just observers.
Exactly. To actually capture and transmit the fan culture, the spatial media architecture requires a profound layer of highly complex social design.
This is the billion-dollar question for the tech industry. How do you engineer a digital platform to ensure that a remote digital participant actually experiences the biological rush of collective effervescence?
Yeah.
How do you ensure they feel like an integrated member of the tribe rather than just a silent ghost haunting a digital recreation of a stadium?
That specific query defines the ultimate design challenge for the next decade of sports technology. Solving it requires moving beyond visual rendering and tackling immense latency and synchronization hurdles.
Which are massive problems to solve.
Massive. It means the platform architecture must incorporate deeply synchronized, spatialized audio channels, allowing remote fans separated by oceans to actually hear each other's voices chant in real time without delay breaking the rhythm. It requires the integration of highly responsive visible reactions, where the digital avatars of remote users physically move and gesture in perfect synchronization with the biological crowd inside the real-world stadium.
So it's not just a visual feed, it's an interactive presence.
Exactly. It necessitates the engineering of coordinated digital celebrations and the hosting of persistent digital community spaces. The ultimate goal is that a remote fan must be afforded the tools to actively participate, to clap their physical hands and see their avatar clap, to chant into their microphone and hear the digital crowd swell, to visibly react and alter the visual space. They must be empowered to co-create the digital volumetric environment, utilizing the exact same biological mechanisms that the physical fans use to co-create the physical stadium environment.
So for the software architects, the rendering engineers, and the platform builders listening to this session, your operational mandate extends far beyond simply pushing more polygons to render higher resolution sweat on a digital athlete's brow.
Much further.
Your core job is to engineer a system that captures, transmits, and scales the culture itself. Spatial media platforms must serve as the instantaneous, frictionless bridge that connects the physical ground vibrations of a watch party in Bergen with the spontaneous joy of an escalator in Boston.
That is the precise technological mission. The athletic competition unfolding on the pitch simply serves as the catalyst that creates the temporal moment. But it is the localized fans inside the physical stadium who create the cultural invitation. Highly advanced spatial platforms such as Stadium OS must be engineered as the ultimate delivery vehicle, the infrastructure that securely transports that biological cultural invitation to a global audience, entirely without stripping it of its raw social power.
This has been an absolutely massive, incredibly dense deep dive into the underlying architecture of fandom. Let us systematically synthesize all of these complex threads for you, the listener.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. For nearly a century, the global sports industry has operated under the assumption that the fan is simply the final passive consumer at the end of a linear supply chain. The league manufactures the game, the fan purchases the ticket or the broadcast subscription, the transaction is finalized, and the cycle ends. But as the granular data pouring out of the 2026 World Cup is proving in real time, that linear transactional model is entirely obsolete.
Fans can no longer be categorized merely as consumers. They are the actual distribution system of the product. They are the highly motivated nodes taking the localized stadium culture, digitizing it, and carrying it globally into city streets, transit subways, and algorithmic social feeds.
They are the ultimate frictionless customer acquisition system. They are actively recruiting uninitiated demographics through highly viral, low-barrier, deeply welcoming rituals, whether that is the values-driven Japanese stadium cleanup or the massive logistical infrastructure built by the Tartan Army marches.
And perhaps most vital to the long-term financial health of any sports organization, they are the ultimate retention system. When the team inevitably enters a losing cycle or when the massive global spotlight of the World Cup shifts to a new host nation, it is the deeply bonded, biologically synchronized community they built that prevents the user base from abandoning the franchise.
So for the sports media professionals writing the broadcast narratives, the business strategists allocating capital, and the advanced tech experts building the spatial future on platforms like Stadium OS, the operational mandate moving forward couldn't possibly be clearer. Your technology and your strategy must capture the emotion, the friction, and the community, not just the literal play of the ball. You must consciously build the infrastructure that actively facilitates grassroots fan culture without suffocating it under corporate control.
And as we close the session, I want to present one final, highly theoretical concept for you to mull over as you design these systems.
Okay, let's hear it.
Throughout this entire exhaustive analysis, we have operated under a single directional assumption. We have discussed how physical, real-world traditions, the bagpipe marches, the Viking chants, are captured by technology and transported into the digital realm to recruit new remote fans. But as spatial media pipelines and platforms like Stadium OS rapidly mature, as latency drops to zero, and as these volumetric spaces become deeply, persistently social, consider the inevitable inversion. How long until the directional flow of culture entirely reverses itself?
Wait, really?
Think about it. How long until a massive, highly complex, deeply coordinated fan ritual is invented entirely within the volumetric digital space, organically created by a synchronized network of remote fans who have never shared the same physical geography?
Oh, wow.
And how long until that natively digital ritual generates so much cultural gravity and biological resonance that the physical attendees sitting in the concrete seats of the real-world stadium begin to actively imitate the digital crowd?
When the ghost in the volumetric machine becomes so powerful that it starts directing the behavior of the physical stadium, that is an absolutely wild architectural thought. You step into a multi-billion-dollar physical stadium, and suddenly you realize the physical broadcast is the one desperately trying to catch up to the digital reality created by the remote fans. What a concept to end on. Thank you for joining us for Episode 2 of the Skyrim.ai Summer Expert Series 2026. We are committed to continually pushing the absolute boundaries of how sports, media, and advanced technology intersect in our next session. Until then, keep your eyes off the ball and keep watching the stands.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Expert Series by Skyrim.ai. We appreciate you spending your time with us. If you enjoyed today's conversation, give it a thumbs up. It really helps us out. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss future episodes. Until next time, learn, connect, and influence the industry.